Alright, so you guys wore me down, and I finally decided to look over an anime video. And since we were at the cusp of the new season of this show, it's Mushoku Tensei, is that what we call it nowadays? Well, I decided to give that a watch, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, someone like BobSamurai, who got his ass beat in the quote retweets when me and Griffin did our video, well, it's time that he went back and got his ass smacked again. Man, BobSamurai's really stepping it up. He has that cool new intro and all of that.
Mushoku Tensei follows a 34-year-old recluse who dies and is reincarnated as a baby in a high fantasy world. Although the isekai subgenre is currently flooded, this anime manages to stand out for all of the right and wrong reasons, the latter of which I'll be discussing in the second half of today's video.
As I've said before, my fellow viewer, if you ever look at an AniTuber video, it's always, I love X, but I also hate X, and they think that this is good writing for a script. If you don't like it, then you don't have to watch it. And anyone that says, well, NECRO, maybe I want to engage with the media, well, not everything is made for you, sweaty.
Starting off with what I think it did right, let's talk about the premise itself and how it's executed. In Mushoku Tensei, our protagonist retains all of his memories, meaning that his personality carries over for better or worse. I like how the story plays on the common fantasy of one going back to right the wrongs of their life through the sheer power of hindsight.
And if you were a viewer or reader of Mushoku Tensei, then you actually know a little bit about this. I looked through a good couple of those episodes because I started sitting here binge watching it just so I could make this video. And I was actually really blown away. I was like, man, I really miss watching anime. But then I saw this video, and it's been sitting here on the backlog for so long that I decided that since Season 2's here, let's not just take a look at it, but also get another video out.
Rudius lived a traumatic life filled with bullying, which prompted him to retreat into his home for decades. These traumatic experiences are gradually revealed to the viewer in his new life as parallels trigger flashbacks. Additionally, he struggles to overcome issues prominent in his past life, such as venturing out into the world, overcoming social obstacles, and most importantly, self-restraint. But more on that one later.
If you have the power of foresight, then don't worry, you're absolutely correct. That's going to be what we're going to talk about in this video.
Rudius is also a big gamer, so in his second chance he chooses to gamify the entire world. He begins by becoming the world's first autodidact toddler, grinding away in front of his mother's magical tomes until he's mastered intermediate level spells. He also applies himself by learning economics and various languages so he can have a fair chance at prospering regardless of what part of the world he finds himself in.
And that in and of itself is pretty notable, and it's also something that I admire. If you had a new start at life, would you choose to learn new languages and try to better yourself and perfect your technique, or would you relive the entire experience all over again? Some would probably choose the latter, but honestly, I think if I had to choose everything over again, things could probably have been a lot different, but in a new world where magic reigns supreme, I think I'm going to take the first option.
Another aspect that I enjoy with fantasy anime in general is the world building, and I wasn't disappointed. The anime features vast lore containing numerous countries and races, all with their own distinct cultures and languages. There are even numerous magical elements displayed within the first season that inspired much curiosity for its continuation, such as floating islands and random levitating magical spheres. It's clear to see that the lore we're introduced to is only the tip of the iceberg. Additionally, the combat system is just as vast, although it appears to be broken down into only two classes, warrior and mage. There are still numerous ranks and skill sets between them.
Yeah, and world building is important, and if you think that it isn't, I dare you to go look at another show of your favorite kind. I don't know what it is, it probably is Dragon Ball, but you know, what is world building when there's power scaling? But anyways, the whole point is that in Mushoku Tensei, they lay out very evenly what is going on in this world and the different powers that they have and the reason that they have them, but also because it's pretty important to the rest of the story going forward, at least past episode 4. But I will go ahead and dare to say that he didn't make it that far.
For example, mage spells are broken down into elemental, healing, and summoning. I liked how Rudius's parents were both warrior and mage, so he was split between learning magic in the day and swordplay at night. This allowed us to see that he has weaknesses and isn't capable of being equally proficient in both, at least as of yet. There's also a fair bit of politics involved, but I won't touch on that due to spoilers. However, I will say that the human government is an aristocracy, and we all know the behind-the-scenes drama that's usually involved in regards to succession.
It's really just basic, RPG stuff, which is why Rudius takes a very game-like approach to everything, because he is a gamer. In fact, it's noted in the first episode that he plays Guilty Gear a lot, but we'll get into that here shortly.
Next up, let's talk comedy. I found Mushoku Tensei to be pretty funny. Most of its humor stems from characters being unaware that Rudius is actually twice their age, if not more. He does a lot of things that are unexpected to them. It's a lot of situational humor that's hard to convey here, but I will say that its humor is heavily but not exclusively reliant on perverted jokes. Honestly, I found myself laughing 25% of the time, and the remainder just made me feel uncomfortable, which I'll be discussing in the second half of this review.
Now, I know it took us a while to get here, and before we do get into the second half of this video, I want to ask you, the viewer, something. And you can feel free to reply into the comments if you'd like, but I think I already know the answer. If you were looking through a list, a specific anime list, and let's say you were looking for a new show to watch, and someone says, hey, you should check out Mushoku Tensei, or if you just happen to see it floating around, what's the first thing that you look for? Is it for the characters to see what they look like? Is it the story at hand? Is it to see the rating? Or is it to see the tags? I'm pretty sure that you can have all of these things at your disposal, and especially since this was already aired, after the fact, and then we made this video to make a review, you should at least be able to gather just a little bit of an iota of what this show may contain. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you don't have to engage with something that is questionable on your list or looks like it's not going to be interesting. AniTubers like BobSamurai here believe that you should always go into an anime expecting everything to be family friendly, when that's simply not the case. If you look at a website like maybe Kitsu.io instead of the other one like My Anime List, then you'll see that it has a lot more descriptive tags, but even My Anime List doesn't slack on these either. And it tells you what this show contains, and it gives you reactions from other people. So if you were to look at something like Mushoku Tensei, for example, you would see that it says drama, ecchi, fantasy, harem, isekai, and magic. Someone that's a fan of shonen and action and fighting, something like your Jujutsu Kaisens or something, aren't generally not going to be interested. And trust me, I've seen a lot of people, including some of my favorite streamers like Tim the Tatman, say, well, I don't want to watch an anime with boobies flying everywhere. And that's perfectly fine, and if he doesn't want to watch something like Fire Force, then he already knows that he doesn't enjoy it. So why in the world would he suffer through it? But even then, he really likes stuff that is pretty good. Like, he loves Full Metal Alchemist and Dragon Ball, and he pretty much, tats them on his body. But again, the point is that if you see these tags, or you see the rating where it says R17+, then maybe you probably shouldn't watch it if you're a little prone to feeling uncomfortable. It's really not that hard of a concept, but again, we live in the literal 21st century, where anything that you want to know is at the tip of your fingers, and searching the internet is really easy. Back in my day as a boomer, you had to pretty much watch it, and then if you didn't like it, then you hated it, and you had no choice but to sit through an entire 12 or 24 or 36 episode anime. Now you don't have to, because you literally have everything at your disposal. So with that said, keep that in mind as we move forward and we get a little bit more information out of someone who feels uncomfortable at, perverted jokes. Something that is just not really all that central to the entire theme of the show, and is only really present within the first 3 episodes if we're really stretching it that far. And even then, he already said that it's pretty funny, but again, some of these jokes made him feel uncomfortable. And you would think after maybe those 3 episodes of feeling uncomfortable, he would probably drop this show. But instead, we get a video, and now here we are to make fun of it.
Lastly, for the positives, let's talk about the presentation. I thought it was beautiful, and I appreciated how the art style changes dramatically between its lives. It almost feels like two completely different teams worked on it due to how contrasting the aesthetics were. I thought they did an outstanding job on the backgrounds in the fantasy world, especially considering how many different locations we experienced within the first season.
A bit of conjecture from me, or maybe it's just a very subjective point, but I don't think two teams worked on this. And if they did, then I can see why, because they are two different worlds, but everything has a certain level of polish. The world itself is very realistic, and it's something that you don't have to really think too hard about, because you're witnessing it in front of you, and it's almost like you yourself are Rudius, at least in this fictional mage magic thing, you know what I'm saying.
Moving on to the negatives, my main complaint relates to Rudius's personality. For one, he is a narcissist. I don't think every protagonist needs to be moral, I just want their personality and goals to be interesting.
Now, I would hate to backtrack a little bit, but didn't you say that everything that Rudius does is to better himself, to improve as a character? Because that's literally what happens when he gets isekai'd into this new world. He finds himself without any knowledge, he is starting over as a young child, and now he has to figure out the world and how to become the best mage or the best swordsman ever, because of his parents who are also teaching him, and that's where we are. He is literally learning, and I think that if you don't know this, that means that you either slept through the entire show when you were watching it, or you didn't retain any bit of information, because I watched it, and I think I can tell you almost everything in a great detail. Let's see how many things you can get right.
A good example was Light Yagami in Death Note. Light was pragmatic and manipulative. He didn't care who died as a result of his goal because he wanted to rid the world of evil. That, along with the Death Note itself, made for a very interesting premise.
Yeah, and Light Yagami also suffered from the consequences of his own actions, because he got too careless. He got too up his own ass to actually see what was happening. So, if you remember Death Note, I don't think that you remember it, because if you're bringing up these points and trying to compare it to this, then you're not doing a really good job. When Light Yagami started to get a little bit too comfortable with his current life and how he was going to rid the world of evil and then keep everyone off of his tracks, he forgot some very specific details. And if you look at the end, which I think was a little bit rushed and kind of weird, then you would know that Light Yagami himself is not that smart. Like, he can be smart because he is pretty smart and he got that far, but he got found out pretty quick and he didn't really have any allies to help him. But with this, it's a little bit different. See, Rudius is literally reincarnated from a 34-year-old, and everything that he knows and wants to know is easy to attain. So, once he starts learning magic and improving his swordsmanship, then he can progress. And like you said, he's a gamer. He can probably figure this out anyways. And on top of the fact that he already knows how to play games, if you're playing a game and you're playing a first-person shooter, you probably know that if you're like on a controller, those are weird, then you probably assume that the right trigger is how you shoot. The same way that incantations probably make magic spells.
Rudius, on the other hand, has no apparent goal aside from treating this new world as a sandbox video game and grooming an 8-year-old girl into becoming his ideal woman. That's right, Rudius is also an unapologetic pedophile who manipulates everyone he can in order to service his sick fantasies. On numerous occasions, he fantasizes and even sexually assaults girls under the age of 12 while he is mentally over 40 years old. Some would argue that he hasn't reached the point where he takes the world seriously.
And this is the part that I think you're looking a little bit too deep into. See, Rudius, in this new world, he's 7 years old, and the girl that he likes is 8, and he still has childlike mentalities. Like, he thinks that she's cute, but doesn't know how to talk to girls, but that's also because he's like 34 and was a shut-in NEET. Now, taking into consideration all of those things, I didn't find it weird. I thought, man, he's thinking like a man, but he's still mentally a child, even if he is 34 years old. But even then, does that make him a pedo if he's 7 years old and she's 8? I don't think so. In fact, I would say that it's more like a child's first crush type of situation. Again, he was bullied in his previous life. You've already mentioned this, so why do we have to retread old ground? Also, if we're trying to bring up that Light Yagami is like way smarter than a 34-year-old man who is now reincarnated into a 7-year-old at this point in this video. I mean, he's literally neurodivergent and a minor. You have to excuse him.
My response is that he lived in it every day for 10 years. If he doesn't take the past 10 years of his life seriously, then when will he?
I mean, does he have to, though? I mean, if he's doing all of this great stuff and he's essentially what they would like to think is a child prodigy, does he have to really take it that seriously? I mean, sure, there's going to be a set of events later on that will help him progress as a person, but does he have to take it seriously?
The way I see it is, there's only one possible defense, and it's that Rudius might see the error of his ways and redeem himself further into the series. According to readers of the light novel and webcomic, he does. However, according to articles I've read, the author simply toned things down after a while because he was getting a lot of backlash from readers, and it was either tone things down or cancel the series altogether.
Well, according to D's Nuts, you need to fucking sit and spin. See how easy that is? I can say according in front of something and still get the same response. It's really not that deep, bro. And if you don't know this, then why are you saying according to? All you had to do was bring up an article. All you did was look at the video when you said, well, this has to be true. And then you looked at an article and didn't even question it whatsoever. So again, maybe you are right. Who really knows? But all I know is that you probably didn't watch this. And if you're having this much of an issue over a 7-year-old doing perverted things, then I don't think you were at any point ever interested in women. Or men. I'm not here to assume.
While it's totally possible that the author wanted to write the redemption story of a depraved character, I think it's more likely that his own fetishes were seeping through onto the page, especially considering that this was originally a fan fiction uploaded to the internet without expecting it to become popular. Not all fan fictions are a sexual outlet, but a lot of them are.
This statement only tells me that you don't read or know anything about fanfics if you're saying that most of them are sexual in nature, which is complete and blatantly false. I don't know how you could assume something like that anyways. Now, are there some weird ones out there? Absolutely. But to say that most of them are sexual is actually one of the most brain-dead things I think I've ever heard.
Furthermore, he states that hentai games are partially responsible for his inspiration due to how they weave sexual desire into the plot.
You know, it reminds me of a redo of Healer. I know we haven't had a video series trifecta of anything of that sort, but it's one that I would like to cover here soon. Maybe I will. But when people saw a redo of Healer come out, and they said, oh my god, this author is making a story about rape, then what do you think the response was? It was probably one of more positivity than negativity. Sure, there were people clutching their pearls, but at the same point in time, there were people that were just as interested to see this story of rape and revenge. Sorry, TW if you're one of those people, but when... it's already too late, who really cares? But seriously though, when you look at the amount of readership, it was mostly women, in a show about a man raping a bunch of women, and getting revenge on them for being awful, terrible human beings. So I think that when you say things like this, does the author himself go out and rape people? No. Does he probably think about raping people? Maybe. That's not for me to assume. And I know the next point that you're going to bring up, and it's going to be absolutely stupid like this one.
Can you imagine how you'd react if you shared your taboo sexual desires with a small website in the form of a story and it eventually became popular around the world? You'd probably want to hide your face, right? Well, that's exactly what the author does.
Or maybe he doesn't want everyone to know his face because there are crazy people out there that probably want him dead. Did you ever think about that before you wrote this part? Of course not, you didn't. You wanted to manufacture something because you don't know any better. And if we were to look at the past things that you just said about making a sexual taboo thing being out into the world as, you know, the thing that blows up and becomes famous, yeah, I think I'd be pretty okay with that. And if you're wondering what it would be about, well, I don't think I really know the answer myself. But don't worry, I'm going to think of something just because of you.
I don't mind separating the artist from his work as long as there are no obvious influences. A good example would be with Rurouni Kenshin. Sorry if this ruined your childhood, but Google what Nobuhiro Watsuki got in trouble for. This didn't impact my love for the series because there are no obvious influences. There's no sexual fan service in any of his works from what I can tell. In my opinion, they are totally innocent.
Yeah, and like I told everyone before in another video, that if you don't like Rurouni Kenshin anymore because of what the author did, then you don't have to, but don't say that it was never good. And it's fine, because a lot of people do separate the art from the artist. That's why recently, if you're here in America anyways, and if you actually care, R. Kelly, one of the most prominent R&B figures that originated a lot of sensual music, if you will. He kind of did that. But he recently got all of his things pulled off of YouTube. His official channel is gone, so you can't just go there for R. Kelly music, because apparently he had to do more than pee on a girl, and here we are, allegedly. Even though it was proved in a court of law. But again, you can still listen to Bump and Grind and just not give a shit about R. Kelly.
Mushoku Tensei, on the other hand, was graphic and detailing sexual fantasies involving children. No ordinary person does that. It's hard to believe that this was originally written in any other context than directly targeting an audience who shares a similar interest, though that is just my assumption.
So I guess everyone that watched Beastars probably wants to have sex with animals. You know, everyone is a lot of people, but I would say maybe 0.05% of those people actually do.
Fans of the anime or light novel may disagree or even be angry with me over this, but both the anime and light novel are censored versions of the original story. I consulted with some of my viewers who are very knowledgeable about the source material, and they helped me understand a great deal about it. They posted screenshots and articles relating to whatever questions I had, and even gave me helpful feedback for this review.
So a review, which is supposed to be your take and your opinions on a certain thing, are skewed because other people had to tell you what you saw instead of you forming your own opinion. And then you're going to take theirs as though it's yours. If I don't even know what I'm talking about, then please feel free to correct me, but that sounds fucking stupid.
Although I admit that the worst is possibly behind me in terms of disagreeable content, and what lies ahead likely improves upon everything I liked about the first season, looking deeper into the abyss behind the anime actually turned me off to it more than the anime itself.
When you want to review something, which is something that I've learned recently, is you have to look at only the thing that it presents to itself, not necessarily the controversy behind it. That's why I enjoyed things like Psychonauts 2 and Eastward, which I would say are pretty high on my list of games of the year, and even Tales of Arise I thought was really good. But again, I didn't look at the outside influence of people telling me how to feel about something, if it featured censorship or something like that, or if it was something that seemed a little bit preachy or soapboxy. But I didn't care about any of that when I reviewed it, and you shouldn't care about outside sources when it's this.
I mostly blame the portions of the original webcomic I read for the purposes of having greater context. For what it's worth, my viewers knowledgeable on the source material agreed with my positive opinions regarding Mushoku Tensei, but somewhat disagreed with my criticisms, despite acknowledging that the perversion was taken too far.
So they liked the positive things you said about it, but the negative things, and when it comes to the fan service specifically, they had to look inside of themselves and say, yeah, maybe they took it a little too far. And I think that they put a little asterisk next to it because they probably thought, well, this is normal to me. And seeing this character act this way is actually really funny. I think that they were trying to not hurt your feelings by calling you a little soy boy. But, you know, even that's a little worn out nowadays. So I'm just going to call you retarded and move on.
Their thoughts on the first season were that it was mostly a fair adaptation, but it was rushed in certain areas. The source material gave greater detail to some of the characters, mostly the family maid. The last third was apparently rushed, removing entire chunks of interesting character interaction from the third volume. Apparently, the anime betrays some of the subtle character development featured in the light novel. Supposedly, the halfway point of the first season was the turning point in the light novel where the protagonist begins to develop. The anime allegedly negates this subtle development in favor of giving into perversion.
Allegedly, supposedly. These aren't things that you know? You watched it, right? Or are you saying that you didn't watch it and you just want to be angry so you can make a review to say that this is a pretty mid show. I mean, if you think it's bad, like, by all means, like, no one has to like everything. But if you're gonna complain about something, make sure that allegedly and supposedly don't show up, especially for source materials that you halfway read for a show that you didn't watch.
My overall opinions on Mushoku Tensei Season 1 as of right now rest in a gray nexus of conflicting emotions. On one hand, it offers a lot to enjoy, but on the other hand, I find it repulsive for scenes that admittedly occupy a portion of the overall series.
All of the things that you're complaining about are literally only in like the first 3 episodes, maybe even 4. And that's an 11 episode series, so you're upset at a fraction of what's supposed to be a part of the show? I don't understand. And again, you could look at the tags before you watch it. You could say, this has ecchi stuff in it. I probably shouldn't watch it if I think it'll make me uncomfortable seeing booba. And instead you wanted to dive headfirst into this and praise it for everything that is, just to be real, it's everything that's boring, but the other stuff?
It's kind of like your favorite restaurant is offering a free 10-course meal under the restriction that you have to empty all of your plates.
Oh my goodness, food analogies. They're the worst type of analogies that you can have.
But on the edge of your first plate is a little drop of poop. Whether you walk away hungry, eat around it, then walk away, or gobble it up in anticipation of what comes next will differ for everyone.
I'm just going to say, in what realm of possibility is it that there is a piece of poop on someone's plate at a restaurant, especially one that you've been going to for years? If anything, you either don't eat it, or you just say, hey, there's shit on my plate and I want my money back, and then you leave. I mean, both of those cases, you're not going to eat the food, but in the case that you even get that far, I mean, it's only a little bit of shit, and you can probably eat around it, and then you can tell them, well, I'm still not paying for it. Again, you don't have to eat it.
I personally remain skeptical, and I will consider revisiting the anime on a later date, provided the content has changed.
The content is going to change? Bro, it's already set in stone. If you don't like it now, and you think that the perverted jokes make you uncomfortable, no amount of time is going to make that feel less uncomfortable for you unless you start growing a pair.
As things stand, I can't under good conscience recommend Mushoku Tensei Season 1, but you're free to decide for yourself.
Well, I can recommend it because I saw it. If you're interested in anything that this has to offer and you're not offended by perverted jokes, then by all means give this a watch, and maybe you'll hate it for a completely different reason than BobSamurai here. But as far as I'm concerned, I actually really like it. I think that you probably will too.
I give it a 6.5 out of 10. The second season is slated to air July 2021, so it's only a 4-month wait. It may clear up some of these issues, but I'll reevaluate my stance on it when the time comes.
That means that we already have a part 2 of this video confirmed. So until then, I think I'll leave you guys to it with another one of these beautiful videos. And in the near future, I know one that you're gonna absolutely love. And the person that I'm going to make it on is going to absolutely cope and seethe, because that video's private, but don't worry, we'll get there when we get there. But thank you for your continued support, fellow YouTube members and Patreon supporters. As far as patrons go, thank you to Aisha Fan Mazrika, Raymond Ortega, Rent Rants, and Super Reflex for the $10 premium tier, and also to Grim Walker and Shiverfluff for the $5. Much appreciated. Thank you to Joshua Perez, Raymond Ortega, Pokemon Red, and Hey I'm Turtle for the Master Tier 5 here on YouTube. And don't worry, streams will start beginning really soon. I just have to find the time, and then you can actually get benefits out of it. I know, I keep saying it, but it never happens. But don't worry, I mean it this time. Like, for realsies.